Hamas telling us that they have agreed to this ceasefire proposal that's been on the table. There's been lots of rumour and counter-rumour over the last 48 hours as to where the negotiations have been, to the status of the negotiations. But we are hearing from Hamas, obviously, goes without saying, crucial to these negotiations. One of the two belligerents in this war that's been lasting for more than 15 and a half months, that they have agreed to this proposal. Now that comes about half an hour after it was reported that there were some last-minute snags in the negotiations. We were expecting to hear from the Qatari Prime Minister, and he was expected to confirm that agreement had been reached. That press conference has been delayed, at least. We heard that he was meeting with Hamas officials in his offices in Doha. But it seems like any snags, as was the quote, have gone away and an agreement has been found. Now, we wait to hear, firstly, from the Israeli side, and we await to hear as well officially from the mediators involved, the Egyptians, the Americans and the Qataris. But it looks like what we were starting to expect, that a ceasefire could be announced later this evening.
And Alistair, we're just seeing some words here from Reuters as well, just because of an outline of what a deal might look like. They're suggesting it would be a 6-week initial ceasefire phase, the withdrawal of Israeli troops and the release of hostages in exchange for Palestinian detainees held by Israel also being released. Is that your understanding of the kind of broad parameters that we're looking at here?
Yeah, absolutely. 42 days, 33 hostages, women, children, hostages over the age of 50 and the unwell. In return, somewhere around 900 to in excess of 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. The reason I'm not being precise is I think the calculation that had been agreed upon was that for every civilian hostage, 20 Palestinian prisoners would be released. For every serving IDF soldier, 30 Palestinian prisoners would be released. So hundreds, probably more than 1,000 in the first phase of Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails will be released as well. And then, Darren, I think it's important to also add that we expect to see an agreement that would see a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza, something like 500 or 600 truckloads of aid every single day, because that humanitarian crisis is dire and the need for that aid is great on the ground in Gaza.
And do we think, just finally on this, Alistair, do we think in part this is effectively because we're seeing the transition in the United States? You know, this is President Biden trying to get a deal over the line before he leaves the White House, while at the same time, clearly officials from President-elect Trump piling pressure, particularly, it must be said, maybe on the Israelis.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting that if a deal is announced and has been agreed and announced, how the two US administrations claim credit for it. And I think, you know, in fairness, both can claim some credit. I mean, firstly, the outgoing Biden administration, you know, they have spent hours and hours, months and months trying to negotiate this deal. They say that the deal that is being agreed to is pretty much identical to a deal that they had put on the table in spring last year. So they have put in a lot of hard yards. But certainly the election of Donald Trump back to the White House, the threats that Donald Trump has been making in recent weeks that all hell will break loose if a deal is not agreed by his inauguration, which comes this coming Monday, you know, that works to a certain degree. Trump's unpredictability works in the Middle East on some occasions, and it does seem to have helped unblock the pipes here. But, you know, of course, there are other factors as well. The fact that Israel fought a war against Hezbollah and has severely degraded Hezbollah as a threat. The fact that President Bashar al-Assad fled from Syria unexpectedly. And the fact that Iran has been given, at the very least, a bloody nose by Israeli airstrikes on its territory. You know, those were all areas that Hamas would have expected to see militant groups coming to their defense. I think there's a realization in Hamas now that nobody is coming to their defense, that they are isolated, that they are not defeated. 9 Israeli soldiers have been killed in Gaza in the past week. There is still fighting going on in Gaza. But I think Hamas also realizes that any support that they expected to get from Iran or its axes is no longer there, is not going to be coming. And for them, now is the time to make a deal as well.